Amy Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Aurora and watched the stars through the main window. She had been in space for 3 months now, leading her crew of 12 on a mission to map new systems near Vega. The work was boring most days, but Amy loved being out here among the stars. She was 32 years old and had spent 10 years in the Earth Space Navy. This was her first command, and she wanted to do everything right. The Aurora was not a big ship. It had good sensors and fast engines, but only light weapons. Their job was to scout and explore, not to fight. Amy's crew was small but skilled. They had been working together for 6 months, and she trusted each of them with her life. Lieutenant Jake Morris sat at the navigation station. He was young and smart, always eager to learn new things. Sergeant Lisa Park handled weapons and security. She was tough and never backed down from anything. Chief Engineer Bob Kelly kept the ship running no matter what went wrong. The rest of the crew worked on sensors, communications, and ship systems. Amy had grown up on a farm in Kansas before joining the Navy. Her father had taught her to work hard and never give up. Her mother had shown her how to care for others. These lessons had made her a good officer. Her crew respected her because she listened to them and kept them safe. On this day, they were checking a system that looked empty on the long-range scans. 3 planets circled a yellow star, but no signs of life showed up on their instruments. Amy ordered the ship to move closer for a better look. This was routine work that they had done dozens of times before. Jake called out from his station, "Something strange on sensors, Captain. I'm getting readings that don't match our star charts." Amy walked over to look at his screen. The display showed several large objects near the 3rd planet. They were too big to be asteroids and too regular, in shape to be natural. "Are those ships?" she asked. Lisa checked her weapons display. "Unknown contacts confirmed. Count shows 15 vessels of different sizes. They're not broadcasting any signals." Amy felt her heart beat faster. In all their months of exploring, they had never found alien ships. Humans had been traveling to other stars for 50 years, but had never met another intelligent species. If these were really alien vessels, this would be the most important discovery in human history. "Open a communication channel," Amy ordered. "Broadcast on all frequencies. Tell them we come in peace and want to talk." The communications officer, Pete Stone, worked at his controls. "Channel open, Captain. Broadcasting our standard first contact message." They waited. The alien ships did not respond. Instead, something much worse happened. The ships began to move toward the Aurora. Their formation was clearly military, and their approach looked hostile. "Captain," Lisa called out. "They're locking weapons on us. Multiple targeting systems are active." Amy's mind raced. They were alone, millions of miles from the nearest human settlement. No one would come to help them if these aliens meant harm. She had to make a choice quickly. "Jake, plot a course back to the jump point, maximum speed," she ordered. "Pete, keep broadcasting peaceful intentions. Maybe they just don't understand us yet." The Aurora turned and began to accelerate away from the alien fleet. Amy hoped they could reach the jump point and escape to warn Earth about this discovery. But the alien ships were faster than her scout vessel. "Incoming fire," Lisa announced. Strange energy beams reached out from the alien ships and struck the Aurora's shields. The ship shook and warning lights flashed on the bridge. "Shields down to 60%, Bob reported from engineering. "These weapons are more powerful than anything we've seen before." Amy gripped her command chair as more alien weapons hit the ship. She had trained for combat, but this was her first real battle. Her small ship could not fight 15 larger vessels and win. Their only hope was to run. "How long to the jump point?" she asked Jake. 8 minutes at current speed," he replied. More energy beams struck the Aurora. The lights flickered and smoke began to fill the bridge. Amy could hear the sound of hull plates buckling under the alien attack. "Shields failing," Bob called out. "We're taking damage to the main engines." Amy watched their speed drop on the display. The alien ships were getting closer. She knew they would not make it to the jump point in time. She had to try something else. "Lisa, return fire with everything we have," she ordered. "Maybe we can slow them down." The Aurora's light weapons fired back at the alien fleet. Their lasers and missiles were tiny compared to the alien energy beams, but Amy hoped to buy some time. A few of their shots hit alien ships but did little damage. The aliens responded with a massive barrage that overloaded the Aurora's remaining shields. Energy beams punched through the hull in several places. The ship's artificial gravity failed and everyone floated in their seats. Hull breach on Deck 3, Pete reported. Emergency bulkheads are sealed, but we're losing atmosphere. Amy knew the battle was over. Her ship was dying and her crew would die with it unless she surrendered. She had never given up on anything in her life, but she would not let her people die for nothing. "This is Captain Amy Carter of the Earthship Aurora," she broadcast to the alien fleet. "We surrender. Please stop firing." The alien weapons fell, silent. Amy floated in her damaged command chair and waited to see what would happen next. She hoped these aliens understood the concept of surrender. If they did not, she and her crew would be dead in minutes. Large alien ships moved alongside, the Aurora. Amy could see them through the bridge windows now. They were dark and angular, nothing like human ships. Strange lights pulsed along their hulls in patterns she did not recognize. "Captain," Lisa said quietly, "something's docking with our airlock." Amy nodded. She had made her choice. Now she had to face whatever came through that airlock and try to keep her crew alive. The aliens that came through the airlock were unlike anything Amy had ever imagined. They stood 7 feet tall on 4 legs, with long arms that ended in clawed hands. Their skin was gray and covered with hard plates like armor. Their heads were large with black eyes that showed no emotion. They moved with deadly grace and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Amy and her crew were floating in the damaged bridge when the aliens arrived. The creatures spoke to each other in harsh, clicking sounds that hurt Amy's ears. She could not understand their language, but their intent was clear. They were conquerors, and humans were now their prisoners. The alien leader pointed a weapon at Amy and made a gesture she understood. She was to come with them. Amy looked at her crew one last time. Jake's face was pale with fear. Lisa was angry and ready to fight. Bob looked worried about his damaged ship. The others waited for her orders. "Do what they say," Amy told her crew. "Stay alive, that's an order." The aliens separated Amy from her crew and took her to their ship. The corridors were dark and cold, filled with the same clicking sounds she had heard before. Other aliens watched her pass with those black, emotionless eyes. Amy tried to memorize the layout of the ship, but it was too large and complex. They brought her to a room with no windows and locked her inside. The walls were smooth metal, and the only light came from panels in the ceiling. There was a sleeping platform and nothing else. Amy sat down and tried to think about what had happened. Her crew was probably dead by now. These aliens had attacked, without warning and without trying to communicate. They were clearly hostile to other species. Amy wondered if Earth knew about this threat. The Aurora had been supposed to report in every week, so someone would notice when they missed their next check-in. Hours passed before the aliens came for her again. They took her to a larger room where the alien leader waited. This one was bigger than the others and wore symbols that might have been rank insignia. When it spoke, a device on the wall translated its words into English. "I am Vex Thalan, commander of the Kethmori fleet," the alien said. "You are human. Your species is weak and inferior. You will tell me about your military forces and the location of your colonies." Amy stood as straight as she could and looked the alien in the eyes. "I am Lieutenant Commander Amy Carter of the Earth Space Navy. According to military law, I only have to give you my name, rank, and service number." Vexthalan made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your laws mean nothing here, human. The Kethmori have conquered 47 species across this galaxy. All of them thought their laws and customs would protect them. All of them were wrong." The alien commander gestured to guards who forced Amy into a chair. Metal bands locked around her arms and legs, holding her in place. Vexthalan moved closer and studied her face with those black eyes. "We have been watching your species for some time," he continued. "You are young and primitive, but you have potential to cause trouble if allowed to grow. The Kethmori Council has decided that humanity must be controlled or eliminated. Amy felt cold fear in her stomach, but she kept her voice steady. If you've been watching us, then you know we're explorers, not conquerors. We want peace. Peace is what the strong give to the weak, Vexthalin replied. Your species will serve the Kethmori Empire or it will be destroyed. The choice is yours to make. The interrogation began immediately. Vexthalin wanted to know everything about Earth's defenses, the size of the human fleet, and the locations of all human colonies. Amy refused to answer. The alien commander seemed to expect this and gestured to his guards. Pain, unlike anything Amy had ever felt, shot through her body. The chair was designed to cause agony without permanent damage. Every nerve in her body screamed, but she bit her tongue and said nothing. The pain stopped after what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. That was the lowest setting, Vexthalin informed her. We have many levels above that, and we have time. Your crew is dead, your ship is destroyed, and no one knows you are here. You can end this suffering by simply answering my questions. Amy thought about her crew and felt grief and anger mixed together. These aliens had killed good people for no reason except cruelty. She would not help them kill more humans. Go to hell, she said. The pain came again, stronger this time. Amy's vision went white, and she almost passed out. When it stopped, she was shaking and could barely breathe. Vexthalin waited patiently for her to recover. You are stronger than most, he admitted. But everyone breaks eventually. The Zerani held out for 3 days. The Holmac lasted almost a week. How long will you last, human? Day after day, the torture continued. Vexthalin used physical pain, mental manipulation, and psychological pressure. He showed Amy images of other species that had been conquered by the Kethmori. Proud warriors reduced to slaves, scientists forced to build weapons for their conquerors, children taken from their parents and raised to serve the Empire. Sometimes they left her alone in her cell for days, with only minimal food and water. Other times they bombarded her with noise and light so she could not sleep. They heated her cell until she nearly collapsed from the heat, then made it so cold she thought she would freeze. Through it all, Amy held on to one thought. Every day she resisted was another day before these aliens attacked Earth. Someone would notice that the Aurora was missing. The Navy would send ships to look for them. Maybe those ships would find evidence of the Kethmori threat and warn Earth in time. After what felt like months, Vexthalin brought her to a different room. This one had windows that looked out into space. Amy could see a moon below them, gray and airless. On the surface were buildings and landing pads. Ships came and went regularly. Welcome to Prison Station Kethdar, Vexthalin said. This is where we keep the survivors of conquered species. Would you like to meet some of your fellow prisoners? He led her through corridors filled with cells. In each one was a different type of alien creature. Some looked almost human, while others were completely bizarre. All of them had the same look in their eyes. They had given up hope. Vexthalin stopped at one cell and gestured inside. This is Corvex. He was a general in the Holmac military. He commanded fleets that protected his homeworld for 20 years. Now he cleans floors and begs for food. Tell the human what you have learned, Corvex. The creature in the cell was tall and covered with blue scales. Once it might have been proud and strong. Now it cowered in the corner and spoke in a broken voice. Resistance is futile. The Kethmori are too strong. Obedience brings mercy. Defiance brings only pain. They visited more cells, and Amy heard the same message from each prisoner. All of them had been leaders once. Warriors, scientists, politicians. All of them had been broken by Kethmori methods. You see the pattern, Vexthalin said as they returned to Amy's cell. Everyone breaks. Everyone surrenders. Everyone learns to serve. You can choose to do this the easy way or the hard way, but the result will be the same. Amy lay on her sleeping platform that night and thought about what she had seen. Part of her wanted to give up, like the others had done. The pain was constant now and she was weaker every day, but another part of her The part that came from growing up on a Kansas farm refused to quit. She thought about her father teaching her to work through difficult times. She thought about her mother showing her how to care for others even when it was hard. She thought about her crew and how they had trusted her to keep them safe. Most of all, she thought about Earth and all the people there who had no idea what was coming. If she broke and told Vexthalin what he wanted to know, those people would die. If she held out long enough, maybe someone would find this place and learn about the Kethmori threat. Amy closed her eyes and whispered a promise to herself and to everyone she had failed to protect. She would not break. No matter what they did to her, she would not give them what they wanted. Amy had been in the prison for 4 months when she met Elena Rodriguez. It happened during one of the daily work periods when prisoners were forced to labor in the manufacturing areas of the station. Amy was carrying metal plates from one section to another when she saw a human woman working at an assembly station. Elena was smaller than Amy, with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes. She looked thin and tired, but there was something in her expression that reminded Amy of home. When their eyes met, Elena gave the smallest possible nod. Amy understood. They were both human, both survivors, and both still fighting in their own ways. The work period lasted 6 hours. Prisoners were not allowed to talk during this time, but Amy watched Elena carefully. The woman was smart and careful, following all the rules while somehow managing to slow down production just enough to matter. She was sabotaging the Kethmori war effort in tiny ways that would never be noticed. That night, Amy lay on her sleeping platform and thought about the other, human. Elena had been here longer and seemed to know how the system worked. If Amy could find a way to communicate with her, maybe they could help each other survive. The opportunity came 3 days later during the feeding period. Prisoners were given food in a large hall, but talking was forbidden. Amy managed to sit near Elena and noticed that the woman was scratching small marks on the table with her fingernail. The marks looked random, but Amy studied them carefully. Over the following weeks, Amy began to understand that Elena was using a simple code. Each scratch represented a letter, and the letters spelled out messages. Elena was telling her about the prison, the guards, and the other prisoners. Most importantly, she was telling her that not everyone had given up hope. Amy learned that Elena was a scientist who had been captured during a raid on a research station. She had been in the prison for over a year and had used that time to learn everything she could about the Kethmori. She knew their schedules, their weaknesses, and their habits. Through their secret messages, Elena told Amy about other human prisoners scattered throughout the Kethmori Empire. There were dozens of them, captured during various raids and attacks. Most were kept in different facilities, but a few were here on prison station Kethdar. Elena also told her about the other species in the prison. Not all of them had given up completely. Some of the more recently captured prisoners still remembered what freedom felt like. They hated their captors and would help with resistance efforts if given the chance. Amy began to see possibilities that she had not considered before. Vexthalin wanted her to break and give up like all the others, but what if she could do the opposite? What if she could find a way to inspire resistance instead of surrender? The idea was dangerous and probably impossible, but it gave Amy something to focus on besides the daily torture sessions. She began to pay attention to everything around her. She memorized guard schedules and noted security weaknesses. She watched other prisoners and identified those who might still have fight left in them. Elena taught her how to communicate with other prisoners without being caught. The scratch code could be used to leave messages in work areas and common spaces. Over time, they developed a network of prisoners who could pass information throughout the station. Amy learned that some of the alien prisoners had useful skills. A creature called Tharn had been an engineer and knew how the station's systems worked. A being named Zilka had been a soldier and understood military tactics. Others had knowledge of communications, manufacturing, and security systems. Working through Elena's network, Amy began to organize these prisoners into something resembling a resistance cell. She could not meet with them directly, but she could send messages and receive reports through the scratch code system. The network grew, slowly and carefully. Amy insisted that they only recruit prisoners who were trustworthy and capable. One mistake would expose them all and result in punishment that would make their current suffering seem mild. As the months passed, Amy noticed changes in some of the other prisoners. Word was spreading about the human who would not break. Prisoners who had given up hope began to remember what it felt like to resist. Some of them started to find small ways to sabotage their work or slow down production. Vexthalon noticed these changes and increased the pressure on Amy. The torture sessions became longer and more intense. He brought in specialists who used advanced technology to attack her mind directly. They tried to plant false memories and break down her sense of identity. Through it all, Amy held on to her core mission. Every day she resisted was another day. That Earth remained safe. Every prisoner who found hope again was a victory against the Kethmori Empire. Every small act of sabotage weakened their enemies and brought humanity closer to survival. Elena became more than just an ally. She became Amy's closest friend and the person who kept her sane during the worst moments. When the torture was too much and Amy wanted to give up, Elena would find ways to remind her why she had to keep fighting. The network began to uncover important information about Kethmori plans. Through careful observation and analysis, they learned that the aliens were preparing for something big. More ships were arriving at the station, and production had increased dramatically. Elena's scientific training helped her piece together what was happening. The Kethmori were building weapons and equipment for a massive military operation. Based on the conversations she had overheard from guards, the target was Earth itself. This news changed everything for Amy. The torture had been designed to break her spirit and make her give up information about human defenses. But now she realized that Vexthalon had a larger goal. He wanted to use her knowledge to plan the invasion that would destroy her species. Amy shared this information with the network, and it had an immediate effect. Prisoners who had been reluctant to take risks suddenly became more willing to act. The knowledge that Earth was in immediate danger motivated even the most broken individuals to find their courage again. The resistance network began to sabotage more actively. They found ways to introduce flaws into the weapons being manufactured. They caused equipment failures that looked like accidents. They slowed down production schedules and corrupted data files. Most importantly, they began to gather intelligence about the invasion plans. Through careful observation and patient collection of information, they started to build a picture of what the Kethmori intended to do to Earth. Amy knew that having this information was not enough. She needed to find a way to get it to Earth before the invasion began. The Kethmori had faster ships and better technology than humans. Once their fleet left for Earth, it would be too late to stop them. Elena told her about the station's communication systems. They were heavily guarded and monitored, but they were also the only way to send a message across the vast distances of space. If they could find a way to access those systems, they might be able to warn Earth about what was coming. The plan they developed was desperate and dangerous. It would require the cooperation of dozens of prisoners and perfect timing to succeed. Most of them would probably die in the attempt, but Amy knew they had to try. As she lay in her cell planning the details of their operation, Amy thought about all the people on Earth who had no idea what was coming. She thought about her parents on their farm in Kansas, going about their daily lives without knowing that alien warships were preparing to destroy everything they had ever known. She thought about her fellow officers in the Earth Space Navy, brave men and women who would fight to defend their home, but who would be overwhelmed by superior Kethmori technology. She thought about the billions of innocent people who deserved a chance to prepare for what was coming. Amy closed her eyes and made another promise. She would find a way to warn Earth, no matter what it cost her. The network she had built would not just resist their captors, they would save humanity itself. The uprising began at exactly 0300 station time, when the guard shifts changed and security was at its weakest. Amy had spent months planning every detail with Elena and their network of resistance fighters. They had identified 17 critical targets throughout the station that needed to be hit simultaneously for the plan to work. Amy's own mission was the most dangerous. She had to reach the communication center and transmit a warning message to Earth, while the others created diversions and sabotaged production facilities. Elena would lead a team to the weapons storage area to arm as many prisoners as possible. The signal to begin was simple. Amy scratched a mark on her cell wall that could be seen from the corridor. Other prisoners saw the mark and passed the signal through the network using their established communication system. Within minutes, prisoners throughout the station began to move. Tharn, the engineer from a species called the Vortani, was the first to act. He had spent months learning the location of every power junction and control panel in his work area. When the signal came, he used tools hidden in his cell to cause a massive electrical failure that plunged half the station into darkness. The blackout created confusion among the guards, who were not expecting any kind of organized resistance. Prison Station Kethdar had operated for years without any serious problems. The Kethmori believed their methods had broken all the prisoners completely. Amy used the darkness to slip out of her cell block. Elena had taught her how to override the locking mechanisms using a technique discovered by another prisoner months earlier. The doors were designed to keep prisoners in, but they had weaknesses that could be exploited by someone with the right knowledge. Moving through the dark corridors was terrifying. Amy could hear the sounds of fighting breaking out in different parts of the station as other teams began their missions. Emergency lights cast strange shadows, and the clicking sounds of alarmed Kethmori echoed through the metal hallways. She reached the first checkpoint and found it abandoned. The guards had rushed to deal with what they thought were isolated incidents in the prison blocks. They did not yet understand that this was a coordinated uprising involving hundreds of prisoners. Elena's team reached the weapons storage area and overpowered the guards there. They distributed captured energy weapons to other prisoners, turning desperate captives into armed fighters. Elena had trained some of them in basic tactics using knowledge gained from military prisoners in the network. The weapons gave the uprising real power for the first time. Prisoners who had been helpless for months suddenly found themselves able to fight back against their tormentors. Years of anger and hatred erupted as they turned captured Kethmori weapons against their former guards. Amy continued toward the communications center, following routes that Elena had mapped out during her year of careful observation. She could hear the sounds of battle growing louder as more prisoners joined the fight. The uprising was spreading beyond their original network as other captives saw their chance for revenge. At the second checkpoint, Amy encountered her first guards. Two Kethmori warriors stood between her and the communications center, their energy weapons raised. Amy had no weapon of her own, but she had something more valuable. She had motivation that came from knowing that Earth's survival depended on her success. Amy dove behind a metal support beam as energy bolts flashed past her head. She could hear the guards clicking to each other in their harsh language, probably calling for reinforcements. She had to act quickly before more Kethmori arrived. Using tactics that Elena had taught her, Amy created a distraction by throwing debris in one direction while moving in another. When one of the guards turned to investigate the noise, she rushed the other one and managed to knock his weapon away. They fought hand to hand, and Amy's desperation gave her strength she did not know she possessed. She defeated both guards and took their weapons, though she was badly injured in the process. Blood flowed from cuts on her arms and face, and her ribs ached from the impact of Kethmori claws. But she was still moving, and the communication center was only 2 corridors away. Meanwhile, Elena's team had succeeded in arming nearly 50 prisoners with captured weapons. They were fighting their way through the station, destroying manufacturing equipment and freeing more captives. The Kethmori were responding with increasing force, but they were caught off guard by the scale and coordination of the uprising. Zilka, the former soldier, led a team that captured the station's main power generator. His military experience allowed him to organize the freed prisoners into effective fighting units. They held critical positions and prevented the Kethmori from regaining control of important areas. Other teams targeted the manufacturing facilities, where weapons for the Earth invasion were being built. They used explosives made from chemicals found in the workshops to destroy assembly lines and finished weapons. Months of work were wiped out in minutes of focused sabotage. Amy reached the communication center and found it heavily defended. 6 guards protected the entrance, and more were probably inside. She had 2 captured energy weapons and a desperate need to get her message to Earth. The odds were impossible, but she had come too far to stop now. The battle for the communication center was fierce and bloody. Amy used every trick Elena had taught her about Kethamori tactics and weaknesses. She moved fast and used the station's layout to her advantage. One by one, she defeated the guards, though each victory left her weaker and more injured. Inside the communication center, Amy found the equipment she needed to send a message across space to Earth. The controls were labeled in Kethamori symbols, but Elena had taught her how to read the basic commands. Amy's hands shook as she activated the transmitter and began to input the warning message. The message contained everything the Resistance Network had learned about the Kethamori invasion plans. It included detailed information about their weapons, their tactics, and their weaknesses. Most importantly, it warned that the invasion fleet would launch within days and would reach Earth in less than 2 weeks. As Amy transmitted her message, she could hear Elena's voice over the internal communication system. Her friend was leading a final assault on the station's command center, trying to prevent the Kethamori from stopping the transmission. Elena's team was outnumbered and outgunned, but they were fighting with the fury of people who had nothing left to lose. The transmission took precious minutes to complete. Amy watched the progress indicator crawl across the display while sounds of battle grew closer. Kethamori reinforcements were fighting their way toward the communication center, and she could hear Elena's team falling back under heavy fire. Elena's final message came through the speakers just as Amy's transmission neared completion. "The message is almost through," Elena said, her voice weak with pain. "They're breaking through our defenses. I can't hold them much longer." Amy finished the transmission and sent it racing across space toward Earth at faster-than-light speed. The message would take several days to reach human space, but it would arrive before the Kethamori invasion fleet. Earth would have time to prepare, thanks to the sacrifice of everyone who had participated in the uprising. Explosions echoed through the communication center as Elena's team made their last stand. Amy heard her friend's voice one final time, weak but determined. "Tell them we tried," Elena whispered over the communication system. "Tell them we never stopped fighting." The communication center's blast doors exploded inward, and Kethamori soldiers poured through. Amy raised her captured weapons and prepared for her final battle. She had accomplished her mission. Earth would be warned. The uprising had succeeded, even though it was about to end in defeat. As energy bolts filled the air around her, Amy thought about everyone who had sacrificed themselves for this moment. Elena and her team, Tharn and his engineering skills, Zilka and his military expertise, dozens of other prisoners who had chosen to fight rather than accept their fate. Amy fell to her knees as enemy fire overwhelmed her defenses. She was captured. Alive, barely conscious but still breathing. Vexithalan would want to interrogate her about the uprising and the message she had sent. He would want to know how broken prisoners had managed to organize such effective resistance. As the Kethamori guards dragged her away from the ruined communication center, Amy smiled through her pain. She had kept her promise to everyone who had died today. Earth would know what was coming, and humanity would have a chance to survive. Amy's message reached Earth 7 days after the uprising. Admiral Kate Morrison was in her office at Fleet Command when the communication came through the Deep Space Relay Network. She had been expecting routine reports from scout ships, but what she received instead changed everything. The message was badly damaged from its journey across space, but the essential information was clear. An alien species called the Kethamori was preparing to attack Earth. They had superior technology and a massive fleet. Most importantly, they would arrive in less than 1 week. Kate had served in the Earth Space Navy for 25 years. She had fought pirates and rebels but never faced anything like this. The message contained detailed intelligence about alien weapons and tactics that seemed almost impossible to believe. Yet the source was Lieutenant Commander Amy Carter, an officer Kate knew personally and trusted completely. Within hours, every human ship in known space was racing toward Earth. Colony defense forces abandoned their posts. Trade vessels were converted into armed transports. Scientists worked around the clock to analyze the alien technology described in Amy's message and develop countermeasures. The information Amy had died to obtain proved invaluable. Her message revealed that Kethamori ships relied heavily on energy, shields that had specific frequencies. Human engineers developed new weapons that could disrupt those shields. Her intelligence about alien tactics allowed military planners to prepare strategies that played to human strengths. When the Kethmori invasion fleet arrived at Earth, they expected to find a primitive species with limited defenses. Instead, they encountered a prepared enemy that knew their weaknesses. The first wave of alien ships was met by human vessels using tactics specifically designed to counter Kethmori advantages. The battle for Earth lasted 3 days and covered the entire solar system. Human ships fought with desperate courage, using every piece of intelligence Amy had provided. They targeted the exact systems she had identified as vulnerable. They used formations that exploited weaknesses in alien tactics. Vexthalin commanded the invasion fleet from his flagship, confident that human resistance would collapse quickly. The Kethmori had conquered 47 other species without serious difficulty. Humans should have been no different. But something was wrong. Human ships fought with knowledge they should not have possessed. They anticipated Kethmori tactics and had weapons designed to counter alien technology. Worst of all, they showed no sign of surrendering even when facing overwhelming odds. As the battle raged, Vexthalin realized that his prisoner must have somehow warned Earth about the invasion. Amy Carter had found a way to send information across space despite being held in the most secure prison in the Kethmori Empire. The thought filled him with rage and disbelief. Meanwhile, Amy lay dying in her cell on prison station Kethdar. The torture following her recapture had been worse than anything Vexthalin had done before. He had used every method available to break her spirit and make her suffer for the uprising. Her body was failing, but her mind remained clear. Amy scratched marks on her cell wall with the last of her strength. Not the code she had used to communicate with other prisoners, but simple words in English. She wanted to leave a final message for whoever might find her body. Her words were meant for Kate Morrison and the Earth Space Navy, wherever they might be when this was over. "They tried to break me," she wrote on the metal wall. "But I carried humanity's name in my heart. Now, you carry it forward." The battle for Earth turned when human forces began to coordinate attacks on specific Kethmori vessels. Amy's intelligence had identified the command ships and their vulnerabilities. When these vessels were destroyed, the alien fleet lost coordination and began to retreat. Vexthalin's flagship was surrounded by human ships using tactics Amy had suggested in her message. The alien commander found himself outmaneuvered by the same species he had considered primitive and weak. His shields failed under concentrated fire, and his ship began to break apart. As his vessel died around him, Vexthalin thought about the human prisoner who had defied everything the Kethmori Empire stood for. Amy Carter had shown that some beings could not be broken, no matter how much pain was inflicted on them. She had proven that courage and determination could overcome superior technology. The Kethmori fleet retreated from Earth in defeat, their first major loss in decades of conquest. Word of the defeat spread through their empire, inspiring rebellions on conquered worlds. Species that had given up hope began to fight back, using the example of human resistance as motivation. On prison station Kethdar, the news of the failed invasion reached the surviving prisoners. Those who had participated in Amy's uprising felt a mixture of grief and triumph. Their friend was dead, but her sacrifice had saved an entire species. Kate Morrison led the rescue fleet that arrived at the prison station 2 months later. The remaining Kethmori forces surrendered without a fight, their confidence shattered by the defeat at Earth. Kate personally led the team that found Amy's body in her cell. The words scratched on the wall told the story of Amy's final days. Kate read them aloud to her officers, and the message was transmitted back to Earth. Within days, Amy's words were known throughout human space and beyond. Other species that had been conquered by the Kethmori heard the story of the human who would not break. Amy Carter became a symbol of resistance that inspired rebellions across the galaxy. Her name was whispered in alien languages on dozens of worlds. The Kethmori Empire began to crumble as conquered species rose up against their oppressors. The same methods that had worked for decades suddenly failed when faced with populations that refused to surrender. The empire that had seemed invincible was destroyed by the idea that some things were worth fighting for. Kate Morrison returned, to Earth with Amy's body and the survivors of the prison station. A memorial service was held that was attended by representatives from every human colony and dozens of alien species. Amy was posthumously promoted to admiral and awarded the highest decorations for valor. But more importantly, her story lived on. Children on distant worlds learned about the human who sacrificed everything to save others. Military academies throughout known space taught courses on courage and leadership, using Amy's example. The message Amy had scratched on her cell wall was preserved and displayed at Fleet Command headquarters. New officers read those words when they received their commissions, and they understood what it meant to carry humanity's name forward. Years later, when Kate Morrison had become Fleet Admiral and was nearing retirement, she would still visit Amy's memorial. She would read the words on the wall and remember her friend who had given everything to save Earth. Amy Carter had started as a simple farm girl from Kansas who wanted to explore the stars. She had ended as a hero whose courage had saved not just humanity, but dozens of other species throughout the galaxy. Her refusal to break under torture had broken an empire instead. The Kethamori had tried to prove that all beings could be conquered and controlled. Amy had proven that some spirits could never be broken, and that the power of hope could overcome any darkness. She had whispered humanity's name in her darkest hour, and that whisper had become a shout that echoed across the stars. In her final moments, Amy had not known whether her message would reach Earth in time. She had not known whether humanity would survive the coming invasion. But she had known that she had done everything possible to give her species a chance. That chance had been enough. Amy Carter had kept her promise to everyone she loved and everyone she had never met. She had carried humanity's name in her heart, and now others would carry it forward into a future she had made possible.